Welcome back to Motivation Library. Today, we're diving deep into a book that's become part of our everyday language, almost.
That was 1984.
1984 by George Orwell.
Exactly. Big Brother, Thought Police, even the word Orwellian. It's amazing how this novel has seeped into our culture.
But there's so much more to it than just those buzzwords, right? What makes it so powerful, even decades after it was written?
It's like a warning,
Yeah.
a glimpse into what could happen if we let go of freedom and let power run unchecked.
So let's paint that picture. Where does 1984 take us?
Oceania, one of 3 superstates always at war.
Constant war.
Yeah, perpetual war is key to how the party controls everything.
And this is where we meet Winston, right? Our main guy.
Winston Smith, he's ordinary, just a guy working at the Ministry of Truth.
Right.
But he starts to question it all.
Which is incredibly dangerous in this world.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even thinking the wrong thing can get you vaporized.
Vaporized.
Yeah, erased, like you never existed.
And what's interesting is Winston's not some superhero rebel. He's got his own problems.
Right. He's got a varicose ulcer. He's not some tough guy. He's just a regular person who starts to see the cracks in the system.
It makes you wonder, what would it take for you to start questioning everything you thought you knew?
That's what makes the book so unsettling. It makes you look at your own world differently.
So this world, Oceania, how does the party maintain such tight control?
Surveillance is everywhere. Telescreens watching your every move, posters of Big Brother with the caption, "Big Brother is watching you."
It's like a constant feeling of being watched.
Exactly. But it goes deeper than that. They control language itself through something called newspeak.
Newspeak.
They simplify language, get rid of words they don't like. The idea is if you can't say something, you can't think it.
It's making me think about all the ways we use language, how powerful words are.
That's what Orwell was getting at, how easily we can be manipulated.
So in this environment, Winston does something incredibly risky. He starts a diary.
His own little act of rebellion.
He writes this powerful line, something like, "The only thing truly yours is what's inside your head."
Yeah, that little space the party can't control, at least not yet.
But they try, right? With their slogans, their twisted logic.
Oh yeah, slogans like, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength.
Wait, how can war be peace?
That's doublethink. Holding 2 opposite ideas is true at the same time.
That's like some messed up brain game they're playing.
It keeps people confused, afraid to question anything. But then we meet Julia.
Julia seems different, right? Almost like she buys into the party stuff.
At first, yeah. She's young, energetic, seems like a model citizen, but she's got her own way of rebelling.
How so?
She breaks the rules strategically. If you keep the small rules, she says, you can break the big ones.
Kind of like flying under the radar.
Exactly. Very different from Winston's more intellectual approach.
And what's fascinating is how their ways of rebelling complement each other.
They show us there's not just one way to resist, and that finding someone who understands you, even in this world, can be powerful.
And their connection turns into a rebellion of its own, right? Their love affair.
Oh, it's incredibly dangerous. Love is seen as a threat to the party's control.
Because it's something they can't fully control.
Right. It's about human connection, something real in this artificial world.
So those stolen moments in Mr. Charrington's rented room, they become even more precious.
They share real coffee, listen to birds singing, things the party tries to stamp out.
It's like they're reclaiming those little bits of humanity.
Exactly. But even their love is a tightrope walk, always the risk of being caught.
Which raises the question, what would you be willing to risk for a taste of freedom?
That's what keeps you hooked on this book, the tension, the stakes.
It's about what it means to be human, to love, to fight for what you believe in, even when it seems impossible.
Even when the odds are completely stacked against you.
And that's where 1984 really gets under your skin. It makes you think about the world around you differently. But the party's control doesn't stop at outward behavior, right? It goes deeper than that.
Oh, much deeper. They want to control the mind itself.
And one of the scariest ways they do that is through doublethink.
It's not just accepting contradictions. It's like erasing your ability to think critically.
So if you can't even recognize that you're being manipulated,
then you're completely at their mercy.
And that's where Winston's job at the Ministry of Truth becomes even more disturbing.
Yeah.
She's literally rewriting history.
To fit the party's agenda, erasing anything that contradicts their version of the truth.
It's like they're controlling the past to control the present.
And the future. But just when Winston feels totally alone in his rebellion, he meets O'Brien.
this high-ranking party member who Winston thinks might be part of the Brotherhood.
The legendary group of rebels fighting Big Brother.
There's that moment where O'Brien turns off the telescreen in his apartment.
Offers Winston a glass of real wine, something from the past the party has tried to erase.
It's like a flicker of hope in this dark world.
But as we'll find out, appearances can be deceiving. O'Brien's true loyalties are far more complex than Winston realizes.
And that's where we'll pick up next time. The twists and turns of 1984 are just getting started.
It's a wild ride, that's for sure.
So until then, keep those minds motivated. It's crazy to think that Winston and Julia believe O'Brien could be part of the Brotherhood.
It shows just how desperate they are for hope, for some kind of connection in that oppressive world.
They're clinging to the smallest signs, a shared look, a feeling that he understands.
And it's that longing for connection that pushes them to take an even bigger risk.
Accepting a copy of Goldstein's book from O'Brien.
The theory and practice of oligarchical collectivism. That forbidden text, it's like a secret key.
Unlocking the truth about the party.
Exactly. It explains how they maintain power, their motives. It's dangerous stuff.
But also exciting, right? To finally have some answers.
For Winston and Julia, it's a huge turning point. It's like they're finally seeing the world clearly.
And what's amazing is how relevant Goldstein's book feels, even today.
Right. It talks about things that are happening in the real world right now.
The hunger for power, the manipulation of information. It's like Orwell could see the future.
He was definitely onto something. And one of the most chilling parts is the idea of perpetual war.
Perpetual war.
The book explains that the three superstates, Oceania, Eurasia, and Eastasia, they're always fighting.
But why, if they never actually win?
Because it keeps the people in line. The party uses the constant threat of war to justify its control.
So it's not really about winning or losing.
It's about maintaining power. And it makes you think, how often is fear used to control people in our own world?
That's a scary thought. And Goldstein's book also dives into doublethink.
How it's used to break down critical thinking to make people accept anything the party tells them.
Even if it's a blatant lie.
Exactly. It's like a mental prison. And in a way, we're all susceptible to it.
We all have our biases, our blind spots.
Right. We have to be careful, always question what we're told, especially when it comes from those in power.
So reading Goldstein's book, it's like Winston and Julia are waking up from a dream.
They're realizing the truth about the world they live in, but that knowledge comes at a terrible cost.
Because their little haven in Mr. Charrington's rented room, it's shattered.
The thought police burst in, and it turns out Mr. Charrington was working for them all along.
It's a terrifying betrayal. Like, nowhere is safe.
And the worst part is, they were probably being watched the whole time.
Every whispered word, every secret meeting, all recorded.
It's a chilling reminder that in a totalitarian state, privacy is an illusion.
So Winston and Julia are captured, taken to the Ministry of Love,
where the real torture begins.
Orwell doesn't hold back in describing what Winston goes through.
The physical pain, the sleep deprivation, the psychological manipulation, it's brutal.
And it's in these moments of complete despair that O'Brien reappears.
Not as the potential savior Winston hoped for, but as his tormentor.
That betrayal must have been devastating.
It completely shatters Winston's hope. He realizes there's no one left to trust.
And what makes O'Brien so terrifying is that he believes he's doing the right thing.
He thinks he's saving Winston by breaking him, by forcing him to conform.
His calmness, his absolute conviction, it's chilling.
It makes you wonder, can you really change someone's core beliefs? Or is there a part of us that's untouchable, even in the face of unimaginable pressure?
It's a question that haunts the entire story. And it's in this state of utter brokenness that Winston is taken to Room 101.
The ultimate symbol of the party's power.
Where prisoners are confronted with their deepest fears.
And not just any fear, their most primal, visceral fear. The thing that breaks them completely.
And for Winston, that's rats.
The scene where he's forced to betray Julia to escape his fear, it's heartbreaking.
He completely loses himself, his love for Julia, his belief in his own sanity.
It's the ultimate victory for the party. They've broken him body and soul.
And the tragedy is that Winston comes to believe the party's lies.
He embraces Big Brother, the very figure he once rebelled against.
It's a chilling reminder of the fragility of the human spirit, how even the strongest convictions can be crushed under the weight of fear and manipulation.
And it leads to that final, devastating encounter with Julia.
Where their love has been completely extinguished.
They're both empty shells, incapable of feeling anything but obedience to the party.
It's a bleak ending, but it forces us to confront the reality that the fight for freedom is never truly over.
It's a constant battle against forces that want to control our minds, our hearts, our very sense of self.
It's amazing how those little sparks of hope, those acts of defiance, can still shine through even in a story as dark as 1984.
Yeah, it really shows you how much we crave connection, how much we need beauty, even when everything's trying to crush it.
And I think that's why this book still hits so hard all these years later. It makes us face some really uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about the world we build around us.
It's like a warning sign, right? About what happens when power goes unchecked, when we let ourselves be seduced by easy answers, by ideologies.
And when we become part of the problem without even realizing it.
Exactly. And it's scary how much of 1984 we see reflected in our own world today.
The surveillance, the propaganda, all the misinformation flying around. It makes you wonder if Orwell was actually a time traveler.
He was definitely ahead of his time. That's why this book feels so relevant, so urgent, even now. It's not just some fantasy. It's like he's holding up a mirror to our own anxieties, our own weaknesses.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive, I'm curious, what do you think we can do about it? How do we push back against these forces that are trying to control us, to manipulate us?
Well, I think it starts with awareness, with being critical. We can't just passively absorb everything we see and hear.
So you have to question everything,
Yeah.
right? The narratives, the information, especially when it comes from people in power.
Exactly. We have to cultivate that inner Winston, that voice that says, hold on, is this really true? Does this make sense?
Even when it's scary, when it goes against the grain.
Even then. And we have to remember how powerful language is. We can't let ourselves be manipulated by words, by slogans.
Like they speak in the book, right?
Yeah,
It's a reminder that language can be used as a weapon to control how we think.
absolutely. And we see that happening today, too. All these euphemisms, all this doublespeak that's meant to hide the truth.
So it's about being aware, being critical, and then what? What's the next step?
I think it's about having the courage to speak out, to stand up against injustice, against oppression, even when it's hard.
Because it's easy to get overwhelmed, to feel like one voice doesn't matter.
But it does matter. Every voice matters. And 1984 reminds us that the fight for freedom is never really over.
It's something we have to keep fighting for every single day.
Exactly. It's a constant process. And even though the book paints a pretty bleak picture, it's not saying we're doomed.
It's more like a wake-up call, right?
Yeah, it's saying, hey, this is what could happen if we're not careful, if we don't make the right choices.
And it's also showing us the power of the human spirit, how even in the darkest times, we can find ways to resist, to connect, to love.
Those little moments of beauty, those acts of rebellion, they matter. They give us hope.
Well said. This has been an incredible deep dive. Really makes you think.
1984 is one of those books that stays with you, keeps you questioning long after you finish it.
And it's definitely a book for our times. So thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of 1984. If you found this deep dive insightful, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel to support Motivation Library. We'll be back soon with another captivating deep dive into a new book. Until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep those minds motivated.